Jack Malone had always believed that a ranch ran like clockwork if you treated it with care and discipline. He was a tall man with strong hands, weathered skin from long hours under the sun, and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He woke up every day at the first hint of light, not because he had to, but because he knew the land demanded it. And it wasn't just once a day. Jack had a routine that some found strange. He checked the ranch 3 times a day: morning, noon, and evening. He believed that only by keeping constant watch could the cattle, fences, and horses remain safe. That morning, the sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink. Jack mounted his horse, Dusty, and rode out to the northern pastures. The air smelled of fresh grass and the river nearby. He noticed the herd grazing quietly, and everything seemed normal. Still, Jack scanned the horizon carefully. His instincts, sharpened by years of experience, always whispered that nothing on a ranch was truly ordinary. After a while, Jack rode back toward the barn to check the fences. Every plank, every post, every wire had to be in perfect order. He had learned the hard way that a single weak spot could let cattle escape or rustlers sneak in. As he walked along the fence line, he spotted a fresh hoofprint in the mud, one that didn't match his cattle. His heart skipped a beat. That simple detail, something others might have ignored, was a warning signal. He dismounted and examined the tracks. They were small, but deliberate, leading toward the river. Someone had been here. Jack's mind raced. The area had been quiet for weeks, but stories of rustlers had reached him. These were no ordinary thieves. They were clever, fast, and organized. Jack knew he couldn't face them alone. He rode back to the main house and called for Miguel, a young and sharp-witted ranch hand who had grown up on the neighboring property, and Clara, the niece of the ranch owner, who had a natural talent with horses and strategy. Both of them trusted Jack's judgment completely, knowing that when he sensed danger, it was usually real. When they gathered, Jack explained what he had found. "Tracks lead to the river," he said, pointing to the muddy impressions. "Could be rustlers. Could be just travelers. But I doubt it. We need to check it out before anything goes missing." Miguel nodded. "We'll need the horses and some ropes. If it's rustlers, they won't just leave quietly," Clara added. "And we should stay alert. They could be watching us as well." Jack agreed. Even a small mistake could cost them cattle, equipment, or worse. By the time they reached the river, the sun had climbed high into the sky. Jack scanned the land carefully. The riverbank was muddy and scattered with broken branches. It was clear that someone had crossed recently. They followed the tracks, quietly, taking care not to make noise that could alert anyone nearby. Every rustle of leaves, every bird taking flight, made their hearts beat a little faster. They moved slowly but steadily, knowing that patience often gave them the advantage over those who acted recklessly. Finally, they found a clue that made Jack tense. A few cows were missing. Not just wandering, but clearly taken. The tracks led into a small canyon hidden behind thick brush, a place that would have been easy for rustlers to hide their stolen herd. Jack's jaw tightened. He knew that confronting a gang of rustlers could be dangerous, but leaving the cattle unprotected was not an option. "Looks like they've got a plan," Jack whispered. Miguel studied the tracks. "They're not just stealing, they're organized. Look at the spacing of the hoofprints. They're moving fast, but carefully." Clara, who had been observing from the top of a ridge, nodded. "And they're not alone. There's more than a few of them." Jack took a deep breath. He felt a mix of fear and determination. He was not the kind of man to turn away from a challenge. He knew that the safety of the ranch, and the families who depended on it, was in his hands. "We'll approach slowly," he said. "We need to know how many they are before we make any move. Quietly now." As they crept closer, the sounds of the rustlers' camp reached them. The low murmur of voices, the occasional shout, and the clatter of tools as they prepared the stolen cattle. Jack's sharp eyes caught glimpses of movement among the rocks and trees. The gang was bigger than he expected. Maybe 10 men, all focused on their work. Jack realized they needed a plan. Acting recklessly could provoke a fight that might cost them the herd or their lives. He signaled Miguel and Clara. Miguel, understanding without words, slipped behind to circle around the canyon. Clara prepared her horse to create a diversion when needed. Jack stayed in the shadows, studying the rustlers' patterns. He noticed the smallest details. Which man watched the herd? Which one carried the ropes? Which one was closest to the entrance? These details would be important. Hours passed as they watched and waited. The sun started to dip slightly, casting long shadows over the canyon. Jack's patience was tested, but he knew that rushing now could ruin everything. Finally, the rustlers made a mistake, a careless laugh, a loud command, and Jack saw his chance. He whispered a plan to Miguel and Clara, and they nodded silently. Timing had to be perfect. Jack moved first, stepping out from the shadows to call attention to himself. "Hey! What's going on here?" he shouted, his voice steady and confident. The rustlers froze. Their eyes widened as they saw Jack, standing firm with Dusty by his side. Miguel appeared from the other side, and Clara brought the horses into view. The rustlers looked trapped, unsure which way to move. "Leave the cattle, or it won't go well for you," Jack commanded. His voice carried authority, backed by years of experience on the ranch. The rustlers hesitated, weighing their options. Jack's confidence was not just in words. It was in the way he stood, ready for any sudden movement. Miguel circled closer, keeping the exit covered. Clara's horse snorted loudly, creating tension and confusion among the rustlers. The standoff lasted several tense minutes. Then, slowly, the rustlers realized that Jack and his team were not bluffing. One by one, they began retreating, leaving the cattle behind. Jack kept his eyes on them until they disappeared into the distance, ensuring that none of the stolen animals were harmed. When the danger passed, Jack exhaled slowly. He looked at Miguel and Clara, who were both smiling, relieved. "Good work," Jack said. "We saved the herd. But we need to be ready. They may come back." The three of them rode back to the ranch, careful to keep the cattle together and safe. Jack knew that the events of that day were more than just a simple theft. It was a reminder of why he stuck to his routine, why he checked the ranch 3 times a day, and why vigilance mattered more than anything else. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jack walked along the fence line again, inspecting every post and wire. Miguel and Clara joined him, sharing stories and laughter to lighten the tension. The day had been long and exhausting, but it had also strengthened their trust in each other. Jack knew that their teamwork, combined with careful observation and discipline, had prevented a disaster. As night fell, Jack gazed at the stars, thinking about how small actions could lead to big consequences. A simple habit checking the land 3 times a day had uncovered a threat that might have destroyed the ranch and affected the whole community. Jack felt a quiet pride, knowing that sometimes ordinary routines could change everything. And little did Jack know, the events of that day would be talked about for years to come. Stories of how a careful, vigilant cowboy stopped a dangerous gang before they caused chaos began to spread across the county. The 3 times a day routine, once seen as odd, became a model for other ranchers who wanted to protect their land and livestock. Jack's methodical approach had done more than save cattle. It had left a mark on the history of the ranching community. The next morning, Jack Malone woke before the sun, just as he always did. The events of the previous day weighed on his mind, but he felt no fear, only a deep sense of responsibility. The rustlers might return, and the ranch could be in danger again. He knew that vigilance and preparation were the keys to keeping the land and animals safe. He saddled Dusty quietly, careful not to wake Miguel or Clara. and rode toward the northern pastures to inspect the fences once more. Every plank, post, and wire had to be perfect. By the time Miguel and Clara joined him, the sun was rising high enough to cast light across the fields. They exchanged quiet nods, understanding the unspoken agreement. They needed a plan, not just courage. Jack's mind worked quickly. The rustlers were organized, but they had weaknesses. One mistake yesterday had revealed a pattern. They acted with confidence, but relied on distraction and fear. Jack decided to turn that against them. Jack's first step was to secure the herd. He and Miguel moved the cattle to a safer section of the ranch, a pasture bordered by dense trees and a small hill that allowed them to watch over everything. Clara worked with the horses, making sure they were ready to move fast if needed. The three of them were methodical, each step carefully planned. Jack's routine of checking 3 times a day had taught him the value of preparation, and now that habit became their strongest weapon. They studied the canyon where the rustlers had been spotted yesterday. Jack noticed that the gang always stayed close to the river, probably because it provided water for the cattle and a hidden escape route. He marked the paths with small signs only he and his team would recognize. "If they come back," Jack said, "we'll know where they'll go first." Miguel nodded. Clara listened carefully, imagining how the rustlers might react if they saw unexpected obstacles. Hours passed as they prepared. Jack noticed movement in the distance, shadows among the trees that weren't there before. He signaled Miguel and Clara to take positions. Miguel disappeared into the brush on the west side of the canyon, while Clara mounted a horse, ready to create a diversion if the rustlers tried to sneak past. Jack stayed at the main entrance, dusty, calm but alert, his eyes fixed on the path the rustlers might take. As they waited, Jack reflected on the lessons he had learned over the years. Discipline, patience, and observation were more important than strength or size. A careful mind could defeat even the most dangerous opponent. His routine 3 checks a day was more than habit. It was training his senses to notice the small details others missed. Today, that training would be tested like never before. By midday, the rustlers returned. Jack watched quietly as they approached the canyon. Their confidence was evident. They believed that the previous day's retreat was a minor setback, but they had no idea that Jack and his team had prepared. Miguel stayed hidden to cut off the escape route, while Clara positioned the horses near the entrance, ready to spook them if necessary. Jack stepped out first. His voice rang clear across the canyon, strong and commanding. "Stop right there! Leave the cattle where they are, or you'll regret it." The rustlers froze, startled by the boldness of the cowboy standing in plain view. Some reached for ropes. Others glanced at each other nervously, unsure how to respond. Miguel and Clara moved simultaneously. Miguel appeared from the side, blocking the most likely escape route. Clara guided the horses forward, their hooves kicking up dust and creating sudden noise. The rustlers were now surrounded, unsure which direction to flee. Jack's plan had worked perfectly. The element of surprise, combined with careful observation, had turned the tables. "Stay calm," Jack whispered to Miguel and Clara, though his own heart pounded. The rustlers were close, and any sudden move could spark chaos. But Jack had confidence. He had studied their behavior, learned their weaknesses, and now they were trapped by his strategy. The rustlers looked around frantically, realizing that their usual tactics of fear and distraction would not succeed against someone as prepared as Jack. One of the rustlers, bolder than the rest, tried to step forward, hoping to intimidate Jack. But Jack's gaze did not waver. "I said leave the cattle!" he shouted. His voice carried authority, and his calm determination told the rustlers that he was ready for anything. Slowly, they began to back away, realizing that Jack and his team were not ordinary ranchers. They were organized, alert, and unafraid. Jack watched closely as the rustlers retreated toward the canyon exit. Miguel stayed in their path, blocking them without aggression, while Clara and the horses created confusion to ensure none could escape with the stolen cattle. The rustlers tried to regroup, but the careful planning of Jack and his team left them with no options. One by one, they turned back, leaving the herd behind. When the dust settled, Jack walked among the cattle, checking each one to make sure none had been harmed. Miguel and Clara joined him, smiling but exhausted. "We did it," Miguel said quietly. Clara nodded. "We saved the herd." Jack felt a mix of relief and pride, not because of the victory alone, but because careful planning, patience, and observation had worked better than brute force. News of the confrontation spread quickly through the local ranching community. Other ranchers began to ask Jack about his methods, intrigued by how one man's routine had uncovered a dangerous gang and prevented a major theft. Jack shared his philosophy simply: pay attention, check your land, and trust what you see. Small details make the difference between losing and winning. His advice was practical, and soon, other ranchers adopted similar routines to protect their property. Over the following weeks, Jack's routine remained unchanged. He continued to check the land 3 times a day, noting every detail. The rustlers never returned, likely deterred by Jack's reputation for vigilance and strategy. The ranch prospered, and the cattle remained safe. Jack, Miguel, and Clara worked together, each step of their daily routine reinforcing their skills, teamwork, and respect for the land. As the sun set one evening, Jack walked the fence line alone, thinking about what had happened. What seemed like ordinary checks, repeated 3 times a day, had uncovered a hidden threat, prevented a loss, and influenced an entire community. He realized that discipline and observation were not just habits, they were powerful tools that could change the course of events. The ranch had survived, not just because of strength, but because of patience, careful planning, and the courage to act when it mattered most. Jack smiled quietly to himself as he gazed at the horizon. Dusty stood nearby, patiently waiting. Miguel and Clara were inside, preparing dinner and sharing stories of the day. Everything seemed peaceful now, but Jack knew that life on the ranch was never truly calm. Challenges would come again, as they always did. But now, the ranch had proven that careful eyes and steady hands could face even the most dangerous situations. For years afterward, stories of the 3 times a day cowboy spread. Jack's method became a model for ranchers far and wide. His routine, once seen as unusual, was recognized as brilliant. The day the rustlers tried to steal the herd became part of local legend, remembered not for violence or fear, but for vigilance, courage, and clever thinking. And Jack, the quiet cowboy with a strict routine, knew one simple truth: even ordinary habits, done faithfully and with care, could change history in ways no one might expect. A routine, a habit, a careful glance at the land had saved a herd, protected a community, and left a mark on history that would be remembered for generations.